And welcome back to another great episode of Secure and Halt Podcast. As always, I am your host, Danny Caballero, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you Howard Falco, writer of the book, I Am the Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. If you've been listening to the show for a long time, you've already heard us talk about identity, and it's a crisis issue. The VA and the Military Times have all reported how hard it is for veterans to transition. One of the key issues that we all deal with is identity, lack of mission, lack of purpose. So who better than to lead us on this great conversation than Mr. Howard Falco? Howard, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Danny.
Absolutely.
And thanks for everything you're doing. Appreciate it.
Yeah. One of the things that I struggled with after my injuries was the identity piece, trying to figure out if I'm not this Green Beret, if I'm not this special operations warrior, what am I? And I had to do a lot of digging. I didn't have your book. I didn't have the insight that I gleaned off of it. I just had a lot of questions. So I just started asking and reading and just grabbing any book that could speak to that. And I struggled with it for a long time, until I started peeling back the layers as to what were my own core values, my own attributes, the things that I valued in life. And what that took me on was a long journey of doing a lot of hard looks inward. And I didn't realize that's what I was missing before. I was looking outwardly. I was looking at all the things I already accomplished in the military, all the great things that I had done. I was trying to grab those things and make them my identity. Come to find out, that's not how we go about it.
Well, it can be a piece of who you are, but it's not the ultimate core of who you are.
Yeah.
And when we lob onto anything on the outside and attach to it too deeply, we're always under the threat of, when it goes away, that hole that it leaves and what it causes us to do in terms of, quote, soul searching to find out who we are. So the more you can go deeper and get to a bigger and greater understanding of who you are, the more grounded you can be in your life, and it can help you get through a lot of things and make you less needful and insecure about a lot of the attachments that we normally have in life. Because as we learn, as we go through life, the one constant is change. And, that can lead to a lot of emotions, such as grief or heartache, anxiety, depression. So the path of self-awareness is really the golden key to helping to get through these changes in life from a much more peaceful and optimistic state of mind.
Absolutely. And before we go too deep, I want to ask you, what was your journey like into finding your identity? Because that's one of the aspects of the book that I enjoyed, because we often look at individuals that write a book or people that are doing a speaking engagement. We look at them as like, wow, these guys they're well put together. They've figured it out. But one of the great things about your book is we get some insight as to what it's like when you go through that journey, starting out and questioning and developing that hypothesis of, man, okay, so where do I begin?
Right. Well, for me, I was just naturally very curious. My father knew how to somehow take things apart and put them back together without an instruction manual. I used to watch him take the car apart down to its last bolt and wonder, how's he going to get this back together? And miraculously, every bolt went back, and he never had an instruction manual. So he had a natural intuitive ability to do that, whether it was building a transistor radio when I was a kid, or car, or doing construction. And so I always wanted to know how things worked from the inside out. And life was my biggest quest. What are we doing here? What's this all about? And then alongside that natural curiosity was my own journey of trying to find out who I was. I love my father, and he had a lot of great qualities, but also there was a lot of negativity, a lot of what I can't do and what I wouldn't do and what I wouldn't amount to. And so that affected me quite a bit as a young kid. And so I always set out to prove him wrong. and to go out to achieve. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go be successful and be happy in my life. And I sought out to accumulate those things that would create happiness. Went out and got myself educated in school out at Arizona State, got a job in the finance industry, fell in love, got married. What was concerning me was none of these things were ultimately satiating my happiness. They were nice when I achieved them, but it wasn't that ultimate feeling of peace. And I was getting really scared because I was starting to work really hard and I was trying to achieve maybe the last thing on the list, which was, the American dream that's been programmed into us through capitalism. A lot of times is millions of dollars. Or you can fall into that trap.
Yeah.
And so I was working to achieve that, but it was mentally destroying me. And I thought unless I achieved that, I was nothing, until I realized that that's not the answer either, that money doesn't provide happiness. And when I realized that, because I was working with people in the finance business that had a lot of money that weren't happy, I was like, okay, there goes that answer. I'm out. I don't know what the answer is to happiness anymore and fulfillment. And that's when the quest and the yearning and the desire and the pain got to an intolerable level. Like I didn't know how I was going to go on with my life. No matter what I had, I was, if I didn't figure these answers out, I wasn't going to go on. And it was very scary. It was really, truly staring into an abyss of.
Yeah.
So that's where my journey led me to this deep yearning and this readiness that I talk about so much to receive insight and answers from a self-serving universe, from a universe that is here to provide us insight for our journey. And everybody's journey is different, but it's here to serve.
Yeah.
You can call that divinity. You can call that God. You can call that source. There's a lot of different ways based on your spirituality that you would verbalize it, but that's what it was.
Yeah. And spirit does play a big part in it. Come to find out. I didn't factor that in. I didn't ask the deep questions. And that's where I'm getting a lot of satisfaction. And it's funny, the money piece is something that we all deal with. I think all of us transitioning from, especially coming from a life of being in special operations, we've been told this idea, we've been told this myth that as soon as you're done, you retire, you get out there and you make millions of dollars. You get into finance, you get into whatever career field you can, and you just make as much money because that's what's going to make you happy. You've been in service and have been of service to other people. Now it's time for you to go out there and make money. Yeah. And so many of us get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm making money now, but I'm still not happy. I'm still trying to figure out who I am.
Right.
But we're still, it's this Western idea that money is going to buy you happiness. Yet we look around us right now at some of the richest celebrities, richest athletes. And what do we all have in common at the end of the day when we're chasing just money? We're all unhappy. We all.
Many.
Yeah.
Many. First of all, before I go on, thank you for your service.
No.
Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is when you're doing something highly specialized where the lives of people are in your grasp based on how you handle it. And it's that important and you're on that big of an edge and that much adrenaline. And there's such a role of mattering in what you're doing. And then you're done with that and it gets taken away from you. To try and fill that immediately is extremely hard because you just went from this high level, place you were in where you were connected to thousands of people all on the same mission with the same intent. And there's big sense of pride and honor and service. And then it's done. Then what? And so that's why this path is even more important for service members because that never gets taken away from you. First of all, you always have that for the rest of your life, but it's just about the transition to a different way of expressing who you are. Yeah. With that being a part of your identity forever. It's just going to change in terms of what you do. And I think when you can approach it with more a sense of adventure rather than a sense of loss, like, okay, what's the next chapter going to be for my life? I might take some time to figure it out, but I've already done one of the highest things I could possibly do in the world. I've already put myself in, and risked my life for my country. I've conquered the mountain. There isn't anything I can't do. I went through basic. There's anything I can't do. So that's kind of a flip in the attitude a little bit about how you're going to turn it going forward, rather than, if I'm not doing that, I can't do anything. I'm not worth anything, etc. I know this is a little bit of a strange analogy, not a strange analogy, but I remember as a kid watching the movie First Blood and watching, the character, struggle with reinstating himself back in society after he was just in charge of, as a young kid, it gave me an eye opener into the perspective of a service member, being in that type of environment and then having to come back and plus, reduce the adrenaline flow and just get normalized into life when, you hear a car door close or, a loud noise, and make those adjustments too, because that can take a while.
Definitely. Yeah. That's, and it's funny you brought up First Blood, because that's one of the, it's very, it's awesome 80s action at its best. With that monologue that he goes into when he's breaking down, that is so true for a lot of us. And it's the single thing that we can all do to enhance our abilities to transition and be well off as we enter the civilian world is to pour into yourself and figure out your identity, figure out who you are. Because you're not just a SEAL, you're not just a Ranger, you're not just a Green Beret or a MARSOC Raider. You're more than that. You're a human being. You have talents and skills that are going to make you successful.
Exactly.
But it's having to come to the understanding that it's just a part of you and not all of you. I love how you broke down the book. All of us are data hounds. Like we love to read, but we're looking for step 1, step 2, 3, and 4. And when you're going through the sections of your book, it's what am I? How am I? Why am I? And that's like right off the bat, you're like, oh, this is a different read. This is not a technical manual. This is meant to evoke deep thinking. And that's something that I truly appreciate in your work. It's not just a cookie cutter, like, hey, step 1, first thing you got to do is find a motivation. Like motivation discipline's all great. This is a different way of looking at identity. How did you frame that? What was the thought process behind this formula?
Well, when this was, and it's going to sound a tiny bit strange, but when this was revealed, or when my awareness expanded from one minute to the next, and I realized the magnitude of the insight, my immediate thought was one of extreme humility. And then how do I honor this for the rest of my life? How do I serve this? And what I wanted to do in terms of serving this awareness was be able to relay it to somebody else, to imbue it in somebody else. And this is work. You can't just go tell somebody this. It's like giving them the answer to a complicated math equation. They can get the answer to the math equation, but the next equation that comes up, they're not going to be able to figure it out. You want the knowledge of how to figure out the equation to get to the answer. So that's the way I approached it. Let me break this down and offer how we are each constructed that makes sense, where each piece fits perfectly into the next, that can help to raise your awareness so that there's no doubt anymore in the idea that, okay, our attention is going to determine what comes together for us. What we focus on starts to move towards us. Like, okay, we've heard that in quantum physics. We've heard that from spiritual people. But how does that actually happen tangibly? So that's why the first couple chapters were dedicated to energy and matter, to show you how it comes together so that you can see the importance of where your attention is going. Okay, that's where my attention is going. Great. How do I change that? Well, now we need to understand how identity comes together, because your identity is going to predicate where your thoughts and your attention go. So where was your identity formed and why? And then there's another really key component in this, Denny, in that many people, because a lot of pain psychologically comes from guilt, shame, and regret. Reflection is often feared by the ego because it's going to produce guilt, shame, and regret. And I thought, how do I get around that for the reader so the reader can read this with knowing there's no judgment in this, and that each moment they've done the best they can based on where they were, so that they will reflect and go, wow, isn't that interesting how I thought that way? And then that's what unfolded for me. I feared my wife leaving me, and then I got so insecure and was so controlling that she started to. Or, I feared losing my job because I wasn't good enough. And because of that, I was so convoluted in my mind with negative thoughts that I couldn't focus on doing the best job I could. And I lost my job. So because I learned from a biggest perspective that life is a true self-serving prophecy, I wanted to empower people with this awareness that they could understand how their past was constructed and how they're creating right now in their thoughts, so they could at least be aware, and what I call true mindfulness is really being aware of how your current thoughts and actions and feelings are affecting what is actually unfolding for you in the next moments or in the next week or in the next month. Because that energy is being put out from you, and we beam like a radio tower who we are. And this may be a little mystical, but the divinity of life is in how it connects perfectly to what we're beaming out to help us create that. Because the universe doesn't judge us in terms of what we want to create. It only serves who we say we are. And that could be negative or positive.
Yeah. No, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into an operation with anybody that has the idea that they're not going to be successful.
Exactly.
That is
poison in the well.
Exactly. Like if you're stepping up to the plate and you're already going to you're already telling yourself you're going to strike out, that you're not going to make it, then whatever you're putting out there is going to be exactly what you run into. Yeah. And you see it in testing, you see it and that's one of the beautiful things about this past experience, my past life. What I used to do is the proof's in the pudding. I've been through every, some of the hardest schools you can ever imagine, where you're constantly being evaluated, where you're constantly being assessed. Every day you're waking up and you're taking an exam. Every day you're waking up and being evaluated. And you see the difference, and the guys are like, okay, we're going into this. I'm going to give it everything I got. Like, I'm in, let's go. I'm already here. I'm here to succeed. And you see the guys that are like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I got what it takes. So if you're already telling yourself that, you're not going to make it. And we forget about that. We forget about that ability to put out that energy, put out that positivity.
Or the power that we have to do that.
Yeah.
Like we can put out positivity as much as negativity. It's just negativity may have been what we're used to and what's been comfortable because it's what we've known. It's what we were nurtured into. And it's also what our genetic line has passed to us, because it's not just hair color and eye color and skin color.
Yeah.
It's social tendencies, mental ways of thinking and processing. So the book is designed to wake people up to that so they can become more conscious in the present moment of how they want to present themselves. And that's where a little bit of the heavy lifting is at first, because it's going to run counter to what you're comfortable with or have been. But if you want change, you got to be a little uncomfortable first.
Absolutely. And that's a thing. You have to be willing to seek out every resource and every possible data point that can help you make the best decision possible. It's not about sticking to rigid behaviors and ideas. You have to be willing to search out for positivity. You have to be willing to search out for answers to how do you grow and adapt? Like, I want to go into this next endeavor being fully armed with knowledge, not with negativity, not with skepticism, not with this idea that I already have everything I need to succeed. No, that's the beauty of taking all the tools and everything that made you powerful and such a great asset to your team with you as you go and embark into civilian life. Now that you're here and you're forming your next, your 2.0 version of yourself, be willing to take up every bit of data and insight from everybody. But I see it's one of those things where it's like we need more people willing to talk and share ideas, as it gets easy to get sucked into what's popular And sadly, sharing ideas and developing ways to be our absolute best is not popular. The greatest hits.
Well, you know what I say to that? Who cares? I'm doing it anyway.
Exactly.
Who cares? But, the other thing you mentioned about asking questions, and it helps to know that, I mean, if you're under a certain religion, or if you Old Testament, New Testament, ask and it is given, knock and the door will answer to you, is a way of saying, hey, the universe will respond to you. God will respond to you. And if you're spiritual, it's the same thing. The universe is here to just reflect back to you what it is you're looking for. When you ask a question, you're creating a vacuum, a space in your mind. And that answer starts to come to you and fill that space. You have to be ready to receive it, because, sometimes, truth can be a little startling. And so you have to be ready for the truth and what will change things for you. But it's so liberating. And as much as anybody has created anything bad in their life, the beautiful, most optimistic thing I learned is that in any single moment, you can turn it all around. Yeah. Because that power's in you. That's what's so exciting. And so that's my mission, is to help people realize that, who are interested in finding out if there's more for them in this world, in terms of the way they think and feel and what they end up creating because of that.
Yeah, it's funny that we turn away from faith, we turn away from spirit, and try to cultivate that. And the more we push it away, the more we try to avoid it and ignore it. You will inevitably come to a point where you can't run away from it. In my experience, you will inevitably come to a point where you've ignored it, and you put it off, but then it comes down to it, and you have a choice. You have to make a choice of, do I want to be stuck here, not happy, not fulfilled? Or am I willing to take a step back and pour into myself in a capacity that I haven't done so in a very long time?
Yeah. And that's interesting, because there's so much misunderstanding. There's been so many false teachings through spirituality or through religion. And so it gets a little complicated when you say, sometimes when you tell people you got to turn to it's not so much turning to the dogma as it is turning to what is possible, what is real, what a new understanding of mind and a new connection with life or divinity can create. And it's not so much again, these words get so tangled up in people's minds because it creates so much guilt and shame, but it's not an obedience. It's an awareness. It's an awareness of what draws favor into your life, a way of thinking and being that draws favor into your life. And if you're not one that likes to move into the religious or spirituals too woo for you, look at science, look at quantum physics. We're talking about the same thing in different paradigms of language. In quantum physics, it's the same expression of how energy and matter come together to produce your experiences of your life. It's just said under a different modality of thinking.
Yeah.
And that, and everybody has a different way of accepting the world and looking at it. But no matter which modality, whether it's under quantum physics or science, or whether it's under spirituality, or whether it's under religion, the process for you is the same in terms of opening your mind, reflection, and awareness. The universe is divinity is constantly trying to fill the gap between who you say you are and what you want. And it's helping to get you there. But until you know who you've been, that has prevented you from what you want, you can't get there. So the universe is trying to help you.
And it's so hard because right now we live in the world that is made up of 15-second clips, 15-second attention spans. And I see it all the time because I'm creating podcasts. And one of the main things you have to do is create content, generate content. And the amount of hits you will get for a great 1-minute video giving you a great intro to an episode with somebody that has something powerful to say, versus a 15-minute clip with the right lighting maybe a little sound bite, something that captures your audience for 15 seconds. That will outperform all your content. 15 seconds, the right lighting, the right highlighting of the words. And it's just like, we are becoming a nation of nothing but ADHD riddled minds. Nobody wants to pay attention and focus. And I teach mindfulness. I teach individuals how to sit down and cultivate awareness in the present moment. And it is the hardest thing to get somebody to sit still for 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes of breathing seems impossible to a lot of people these days. And it's like, man, like it's becoming it's almost the real true pandemic.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. It's related to how technology has speeded up information, and it's caused information overload. And so the brain's way of dealing with information overload is just to break it down into bites. Okay, I got that. Next.
Yeah.
And then time has been squeezed because of all the information and all the distractions. But for the right people who are truly looking to empower themselves, and don't want to let time get away from them, want to enjoy today in the greatest way that they can, or get closer to what they dream of experiencing today, then cause another day that's like yesterday, those people will find the material, whether you break it into 15 seconds, a minute, or 10 minutes. I remember how early on this path with all this work, I was so frustrated with that because I couldn't believe with all this work, I'm sitting, no one, you tell me that the drop off on a YouTube video on something that has this much richness in it. And so I think as somebody who puts information out in the world, you have a choice. You can deny what is going on, or you can decide, if you want to be effective, to start with what will draw the attention. And then hopefully those that are interested will move to longer. We'll move from 15 seconds to a 30-second clip or a minute clip, and then you'll help them. So it's an unavoidable reality, and it's just how you want to address it, right?
Yeah, it is definitely a hard thing to do. It is a challenge trying to connect with people in a world that is completely controlled right now by 15 seconds of content, and it's everywhere. And LinkedIn is not safe from it either. I think everywhere you see it, it's 10, 15 seconds.
But you can still stay who you want to be and
Yeah.
honor yourself in that process. It just depends on what you want. Do you want to move more people to the work, or do you want to stay who you are, or do you want to find some compromise, right?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. So everybody's got to make a choice on that. Believe me, I understand, because to really dig into this work, the real nugget and the gold in this work is in doing the work, is in reflecting, is in really contemplating the words in these books or in these videos and sitting and watching them. But those are for those people who are, and I have had many people listen to all of them and podcast, and they've bought in. It's just, truth sometimes is not the best business to be in.
It's not, especially like, and to take it back to something you said a little bit ago, reflection. Having to coach somebody and talk them through pausing, being still, and reflecting on their life, reflecting on the choices and things that have gotten to the point where they're at. Oftentimes people who do want help, and they'll come down, they'll sit down in our peer-to-peer support group, they'll share that they're at their absolute worst. They want to get help, they want to get better. They're facing, a transition. They'll be leaving the military, but they also have a lot of things they have to get help for. And when you propose that they sit down, reflect, like, hey, what do you want the next 10 years of your life to be like? What do you want life to look like if you're willing to give up alcohol right now and get better and do this work to figure out who you are so your transition is successful? I need you to pause and reflect. Having to face themselves is often a really huge hurdle. How do you promote that? How do you engage with somebody that's like, no, I don't want to look back. I don't want to look back at what I've done. How do I just move forward?
Yeah. like I said earlier, you can't really get to where you want to go unless you know where you've been, because you're just going to make the same mistakes going forward. Or I shouldn't say mistakes. You're going to make the same choices that are not going to lead you there. So what this really comes down to is the will of the intent. And that's why I always start off when I work with somebody. What is your intent? What are you looking to accomplish? Because once they tell me what they want, then I can say, okay, let me show you how to get there. And then I'm aligned with their intent. What we need to do is first, let's work on calming the brain down for 5 minutes. Okay, you can't do 5, let's do 2. You can't do 2, let's do 1. You can't do 1, let's do 30 seconds. So I'll start it wherever they're at in order to begin that process. But their mind has to see more value in what you're saying than fear of pain that's caused so much of the trauma in their life. So they're very protective, and there has to be trust, and there has to be alignment, and they have to see that it's in their best interest. When a lot of people go at them and tell them what they should do, the word should indicates they've been wrong. And that indicates guilt and shame and regret. And it's they're going to shut down before they even say the next word. So when you offer, hey, this is you're driving the bus on this. This is up to you. What is it that you want? And then let me help guide you. And if you're comfortable with this, we can move forward. But here's why you came here. You're in front of me right now. So that's a great first step. Let me show you how to take the next one. And everybody's got their point at which the change is a bit much. Because when they come in a room with me, they're going to get it all. And as soon as they, hit their wall, like, okay, then I'm good. If they're good, I'm good. So, but I don't like this term, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't like wasting time. There really is no such thing as wasted time, because every moment has purpose. But I like to give people it, because that's how I got it, you know. But everybody's not like that. And when somebody's holding on to a very thin identity, and that identity is causing suffering, and you're saying, hey, that's not who you are, they don't want to give that up, because it's the only thing they're holding on to is their identity. And what's left after that is this abyss that I talked about. And so you have a good teacher, mentor, guide has to hold their hand, so to speak, metaphorically, and tell them, here's where I'm going to bring you to something much bigger about who you are. If you're ready for it, to embrace or contemplate. So that's how I do it.
And going into that, where's a good place to start? If we're dealing with an identity crisis, transitioning from the military, or we were in a career for 20 years, now we're realizing that this just isn't it. Where do we start? What is the one thing that we can get to, like, all right, this is step one in the process?
Well, if someone's hearing these words, they've already started, right? They've asked questions, and they've drawn insight, information from the universe in, which is in the form of this podcast right now, that's feeding them, that's saying, here's some great insight and information for you that can help. But what a next step would be is to continue to feed their mind with empowering insight that helps encourage them to get to that tipping point where they see more faith in moving forward on this and acting differently and relaxing in a situation more, or not reacting to a situation more than their previous mental attitude, their physiology told them. Blood pressure, get protective, get angry, get insecure, get worried, someone's going to get you, so that you have to get to that tipping point. And the more information you can get that helps encourage your mind, because the ego is what's protecting the mind and yourself. And based on your previous history, it's going to protect you. So when it hears a loud noise, because it protected you from your life back in the military, it's not going to stop doing that in real life. It's there to protect you. So it's going to make you high alert. But over time, you can start to work on that and give it new directions and say, that's not who I am anymore. I'm in a safe place right now. I am trusting with my environment. I know there are a lot of noises that happen all the time. I'm going to give a little space not to just immediately jump or react. And then when another sound happens, it may not be as an intense a physiological reaction, because you've worked on setting new I am statements about who you are. But again, this is where it goes back to this. It takes heavy lifting at first. So the first step is to continue to feed your mind with good supportive stuff. know you're capable of anything in terms of change, which is so exciting because if you've limited yourself till now, think of what you can do with an open mind and a new belief system about you are. Be willing to question any negative thoughts about yourself. Don't just immediately accept, oh, I'm an idiot, and just walk on the rest of your day. Go, wait a minute. That's not true. I may have made some choices in my life that weren't great up to this point, but that's not who I am right now. I'm a very capable, worthy individual. And that's how I'm going to feed my mind. There's this big kick on health food, right? And all these incredible amount of way we're feeding our bodies now, and we're aware of it, or the environment, what we're putting into our lungs. And we're very conscious of that. Well, it should be the same way with your mind in terms of what you're feeding it personally. And this negative voice can be so normal that it takes the shock of someone saying, hey, you don't have to listen to that. Start slow. Just start every day with a new identity of who you want to be. Write it down. See how far you can get to your day through it. Don't get mad if you fall back. Just keep working. So those are some of the steps, Denny, that someone can take. They're little steps that starts to add up that are working to change the I ams, change the identity of who you are. And eventually, it'll become more normal. And eventually life will start to mirror back the new identity to you.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. Really exciting. It's amazing miracles that happen.
It's true. That's something that I work with a lot of individuals, is understanding that you're not your feelings, you're not your emotions, and then working on that self-critic, especially when you're in moments of transition, moments of change. Like, no one's going to execute a transition from the military into civilian world flawlessly. There's going to be hiccups, but the last thing that you need is to be sitting there bashing yourself for not choosing the right job, for not choosing the right transition assistance program. If you are constantly beating yourself down with negative criticism and you're amplifying that voice, and that's the only thing you hear, and it's coming through as your own voice and your own head, that's a horrible way to live. And it's certainly not going to serve you well. It's going to spin you into even more feelings of anxiety, feelings that you're not going to succeed. And then that's just going to lead you right down that path, exactly where you don't want to be. And it's always met with like a little bit of pushback. Like, no, it's just, that's how we talk to ourselves, to get the best out of our performances. Like, I would argue that it's not.
Well, that's an interesting point. It's just, and I deal with this sometimes with athletes as well. There's this hard driving, negative charging, you want to be worth something, then go, and that may have worked previously to get you to get your energy up and work, or it may have worked in the military in terms of being on guard and being tough and getting through training and being prepared for something really severe to go through, and having the stamina and the mental power. But when you're back in civilian life, you're not that one dimensional. There's many facets to you and what's possible for you. And there's another side to you. There's a softer side, a more, again, I'm going to say this because there's a more feminine side. There's there's balance in life. Yeah. It doesn't have to be always this hard, and it doesn't work because people recoil from that type of energy. It's they sense it and they back away, and it's hard for a regular person to deal with the energy of someone in a high adrenaline state. It can be really destructive to their soul. Yeah. And there's so much more to be discovered in terms of the beauty and the depth of life. And I'm not trying to say this in being soft in life. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying that in a way that there's another part, there's some depth, there's some beauty in life to be experienced. And for people that have been in the military and conditioned to train for that, just like you were trained to be that, you can train yourself for a whole host of different personalities and aspects of yourself. Yeah. That are much softer, will lead to a long, healthy, happy life, joyful life where you empower other people. So it's the nature of change and coming from something really, really hard driving and severe to something a little more present and powerful. Yeah. but equally as powerful, just in a different way.
Exactly.
I think that's the way to say it.
We're not one dimensional, and that's something that
nobody is.
I have a really hard time expressing to a lot of people. We've been told, and we were developed to go in and fight and go into a war that we thought was going to go on forever. And the people that trained us, the people that mentored us, they meant well, and they wanted us to be the best, most efficient, most committed individuals, to be professionals in our field. And we have this idea that masculinity and strength only comes from one aspect, and that's being violent, being angry. And I'm like, no, that's part of it. Like, by all means, you should be able to be a violent, lethal individual, but that doesn't mean in war. Exactly. And when you're at home, you should be able to explore all concepts of who you are. That means there's a nurture, there's a kind mentor in you. You are never going to get rid of the other person, because you need that person. You need that. I am 100% proud of my ability to be a protector, to be able to meet an aggressor and be able to take the fight to somebody if I need to. That's always going to be a part of me. That's never going anywhere. That dude is still here, and it's a central part of who I am.
Right.
But at the same time, there's the guy that's a nurturer. There's the caregiver. There's the person that wants to help others. There's the guy that volunteers. There's the guy that goes to church. There's the guy that is committed to being a great husband.
Right.
And they're all part of who you are. And just because you embrace one part doesn't mean that you're having to cut ties to it. But your irrational behavior, your irrational anger, like, that's not needed. It's okay. It's okay to say, hey, like, I can calm down from this. I can overcome these hurdles.
It depends on the intent. What is your intent? Do you want a better, more calm, peaceful environment with your significant other in your home? Do you want a more calm environment with your kids? Do you want your kids to not be so freaked out around you and worried? And you know, dominant male energy can crush a kid's soul.
Yeah.
Crush it, because they're not wired that way. And it could actually cause them to go the other way.
Yeah.
Which I've seen in many. We could have a whole conversation on this, by the way.
Yeah.
I've seen it go completely the opposite direction because of that.
Yeah.
And so
your kids aren't part of your fire team.
Great. Yeah, exactly. So it depends on the intent of the individual. What is it that you want? And while I have great respect and understanding for what you went through and how you were conditioned to be that for your survival, for the survival of your team, for the survival of your unit, and for survival of the country, and what your mission was, in a transition here, there's another way to go about it. And you said you can keep that aspect of yourself, but develop a whole new understanding of who you are that can shock a lot of people in a really good way.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's, and then you have this other ninja side of you that's like, hey, if anything happens, look out,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would much rather be a fully capable warrior that can make breakfast for my wife, sit down and help and mentor others and be kind, calm, cool, and collective. And then, God forbid, violence is needed. I'm 100% capable of that. That is a beautiful, that to me is what it means to be the soft professional that retires on the outside. Your community needs you. That's a viable aspect. You need protectors. You need people that know the capacity to bring extreme violence to a threat when it's needed.
Right. I want to talk on that for a minute, because this is a really important piece of this conversation, or at least the work that I do. When your mind gets conditioned that life is one way, you start to look for that in all areas of life. Yeah. And you have to remember, as a serviceman who is in a war, you're in one extreme sense of life, one part of reality. There's a big danger in carrying that mindset over into other parts of reality, because what happens is, not only do you start to frame your reality that everything's a threat and violence, and you start to turn on news channels and information that starts to feed that, and it becomes this whole big ball of, and you start to get angry and you start to use what's not there to make it there, that can be very, very dangerous, because that may not be the situation at all.
Yeah.
And you may be creating a lot of that because the mind wants to go back to what it knows and what's comfortable and frame it that way.
Exactly.
But to truly be objective with life, you have to realize that was one situation. That does not have to be my neighbor. Could be the nicest. It's like the analogy is when you're a kid and your first dog you meet bites you.
Yeah.
Then 5 years later, you see a puppy running towards you. You're going to, in their mind, there's this ferocious dog coming and there's 50 people around going, it's a puppy that's wagging its tail, and the kid's freaking out. But that's the analogy. So just to be aware of that, it's going to take some trust and some faith to realize.
Absolutely. And that's what you just touched on is the reality for so many of our veterans. They see the world as a place of constant threat and danger. And it's like, no, it's
conflict.
And it's, I have to be vigilant. I have to be ready. It's like, no, you don't. You're actually, and I would argue, and this is to everybody out there, you're actually not as prepared as somebody that's downregulated, because you're that person that's constantly telegraphing what they're doing. I can only sit in this area of the restaurant, and you're constantly spinning around trying to assess a threat that's not there. That doesn't mean you're ready. That doesn't mean that you're alert. That means that you have trauma and things that you haven't overcome, and rid yourself of it. And you can work through this. There are so many different ways. Now more than ever, be willing to look at the world as a place of infinitely good possibilities.
Yes. There you go. That's what I want. I'd like to talk about that, because that's, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy to life.
Yes.
This is where it gets really, you want to talk about mystical. This is where it gets really interesting. What I've learned is you're going to draw in what you believe is true, because life has to help you make what your thoughts and beliefs real, or it has to shatter false illusions, which it will do too, in order to get you to what's real. But we each have the power to create the environment that we want by the way we look at the world and the way we put energy out. And that's why it's more critical for veterans, because if it was about conflict and war and a fight, and you're not ready to let go of that identity, or there's too much fear in letting it go, like sitting with you, I can't sit with my back, in a restaurant, things are going to draw to you that help you validate that when it's not real. And, you'll read something about a robbery that happened next door while you were eating dinner, and that one time you had your back to the restaurant. I'll never do that again, just to validate that.
Exactly. Yeah.
The point is to change your identity so you can live a happier, more peaceful life, and begin to draw in non-conflict in your life, happiness, peace, goodness. But for the person that's gone through what they've gone through, at first, it's going to seem very uncomfortable because there's a fear of vulnerability. But that's what it takes to get to transformation and change. And if you can keep working towards it and have some, quote, faith in it, you will see that what you saw before and experienced is not necessarily what is in this world today. There's a lot of good people, peaceful, wonderful. Matter of fact, most people just want to live peaceful lives, raise their kids, have a roof and food over their head, and take a vacation a year maybe, or see a few sights and just live in peace. That's what most people on the planet want to do. Yeah. So anyway, just a thought in terms of that process of change. But I understand it,
Yeah. And I think everybody has to come to that understanding. I've made the mistake of wanting to advocate so hard for somebody to change their mind that it gets to the point where they're going to tell you that they're not ready, that they don't want that. They are holding on to that identity of a broken veteran, which is a disservice that our media and our Hollywood movies and TV shows have sold a lot of veterans. That this is your identity, the broken vet. That's you.
But if I could throw this in, they have also done a great job exposing the need to help veterans and what they go through and what nobody knows. I'll never forget that scene in Saving Private Ryan on the beach. that has stayed with me since I saw that movie and has given me an insight and an awareness into what somebody has gone through in battle that I will never forget because it shook me to my core watching that.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, that's what these guys go through. That's what they, you know what I mean? Like, I never saw it through their eyes like that. So I agree with you. There's been a lot of a narrative of a broken veteran, but there's always also been incredible, Born on the 4th of July, unbelievable film about the nature of what an effect on, so, so I agree with you. And I'm offering a different point that, there's always balance in that.
Yeah,
right?
there is.
But
I would say we haven't had the same for our current veterans. I think there's a lot of SEAL Team 6s on CBS. God, I just gave them a free promotion. Damn it. No, there's a lot of engaging movies and TV shows, but there's also a lot of hey, it's okay to stay with PTSD. It's okay to identify what you're going through and make that your identity. It's like, you're not your PTSD. You're not your anxiety. You're not your depression. We don't have to make that our persona. You can overcome these things.
You're talking not just about veterans. You're talking about everybody.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Yes. That's a broad subject. And that's one I'm working really hard to make sure people have this insight to see there is a pathway out of this.
There is. And I've never seen it so much as I've seen it now. We always talk about pharmaceutical companies wanting to continue to create their customer base. We don't want to cure and heal everything, but now we're starting to see it when it comes to mental health. And I'm starting to see a lot of people that feel the need to hold on to the identity of, I'm anxiety and depression, and I'm going to always stay with my therapist. I'm like, hey, I believe in talk therapy. I still use it. Shout out to my therapist, but every great doctor I've ever had has always said, like, hey, this is a journey. We're going to be doing this together. When you get to a point where it's time for you to transition on your own, we'll high five. Just, hey, if you ever need us, you know where to reach us.
That's
now
great.
I'm seeing a lot of, hey, don't leave. Come on, just keep coming, keep hanging on, at some point you have to swim. At some point you have to tread water and learn to survive.
So I'll say two things on that. One is it's up to the individual's will.
Yeah.
If they want to stay addicted to the therapy and the narrative that they're under, that they've been under, that's been their experience, that is completely up to that soul. But I think that obviously force doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Because it only creates counterforce, right? Force creates counterforce. But what can help is insight and information that can raise curiosity and be like, wait a minute, I've never heard of that before. That might be interesting. It might not be painful. Well, let me explore it. And that to me is the process of self-awareness. It's the journey of self-awareness. And it could grease the wheel for them to leave the old narrative and try to sail to a different shore. So yes, it's a complicated issue because there's so many, but again, we start with intent. What is your intent? Do you really want to get better? Okay. Prove it. I got some information. Is this of interest? Let's start talking. You get to your limit on where your identity is beginning, your ego starting to freak out because, wow, this is really going to change me. Who is this guy? What does he do? What is this stuff? That's what it'll start attacking. That's what happens. Then you're good. But I think that new insight and information that has some depth and some impact to it and is not the general bite line or the clinical come in, talk to me, I'll write your prescription type situation, which has helped a lot of people. I'm not saying there's value in that in certain situations, but that's what can help. Those two.
Absolutely. Howard, I can't thank you enough for being on here today. This has been an amazing conversation. The name of the book is I Am the Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. What else you got on the back burner? What else are you working on these days so we can help promote?
Yeah. So there's three things I'll tell you about. One is the second book I also have out that came out about 9 years ago called Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. It's sort of the second part of I Am that takes you into how you change and how you put time on your side in relationship to that change. The second thing is I have a foundation called the number 8 Wisdom Foundation. It's 8wisdom.org that's dedicated to sharing this insight with the world over the next 20, 30 years. So you can check that out. And then the third thing is I'm working on a new book right now, which is will be out next year. And it was interesting how we started this conversation because you said, in complimenting I Am, which I so appreciate, as far as being step by step and how it's organized. This is actually, each chapter is a step, and it is 9 steps to the supreme state of mind of mastering life and empowering yourself to live it from the most creative, fulfilled, and peaceful.
I'm gonna have to definitely check that out, and then we'll have to bring you back on so we can break it down. When is it going to be out for all of us?
It'll be out. It'll be out probably mid next year, and I'm going to release the title first time to you. I don't know why. I'm just feeling it. The name of the book is Invincible. The Secrets of Self-Mastery, Next Level Mindfulness, and the Key to Inevitable Success.
I love that. All the followers of the show know that I'm big on mindfulness. It's you got me hooked on that now. So that's on my radar. And Howard, again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you, Denny. Appreciate it.